There is just one skill that, if you can master, everything else in a helicopter flight simulation will flow from it, and that is a pickup into a stable hover. There's a few things we need to know to achieve that nicely, and I'm going to take you through what I know, whilst making a few wobbly mistakes along the way, in 3 different helicopters. This one, the Cabri G2, also the Robinson R66, and the Airbus Helicopters H125. Let's fly! And we'll start this in the Robinson R66, really great platform for developing our helicopter skills in MSFS 2024. And look up in the top right of my screen here, I've got the input viewer in there. This is a free download available from flightsim.to, a really great add-on for helping to develop our helicopter skills. I'll put a link to that in the video description. So, something else to know, I've set this flight up with no wind, so we're just going to keep this very simple and take wind out of the equation. And I have also not modified the weight or balance of this machine. There's no other passengers, probably a good thing for their sake. And I've not modified the weight or balance. So we're in with about half a tank of fuel. And this does have an effect on the performance of the helicopter during the pickup, so just bear that in mind. I'm not modifying it, and so hopefully it'll be the same for you when you try this out as well. Right, the Robinson R66, even though it's animated incorrectly in this Coronado edition, the rotor's animated the wrong way, it still performs correctly, and that is as if it's an anti-clockwise American system. So with an anti-clockwise system, on pickup, the nose is going to want to turn to the opposite of that, to the right. And so I'll need to counteract that with left pedal. So I know that I need to get almost halfway along on the input viewer scale there with my pedals, almost to halfway, to counteract the nose moving to the right. But with that much tail rotor thrust in, the whole helicopter is going to want to translate to the right. So I'll need to counteract that with a little bit of left cyclic. And I think it's going to be about there. We'll have to feel it when we lift off. And I also know that with an empty machine like this, I'll need just a tiny bit of forward cyclic in there as well. So that's what I'm anticipating. I might need to be ready to adjust it. Now let's try lifting the collective and be careful with the Robinson R66, this Coronado version. The torque, the main rotor torque, it does come on very quickly, so I'm just only at about a quarter of the way up on the collective, and I'm already past 50% torque. 60% now, and we are getting light. Oh, I'm just moving along there a bit, so not too much forward cyclic after all. And now I'm just holding it on the left skid, which is what will happen with all of those settings in there. We are going to be, the right skid will lift first, and the left skid will leave last. So I'm going to add the last little bit of collective in our 2-stage pickup, and let's see what's going to happen here. Okay, we sprang off very slightly to the left, and now I'll just get back to keeping everything in neutral. What I'm doing, I'm creeping forward, so I'm just going to cancel that. What you want to do here is minimize the number of inputs you make. I'm just going to just give you a demo of what it's like when maybe we first start in helicopters, and like we all learn together, right? So no one here is perfect, and when I started there was a lot of this kind of stuff here. I was like, oh, just reverse that, and oh, forwards there, and oh, back, no. Where am I going? I just need to just reverse, and so there's a lot of unnecessary movements. So I'll just try and let it settle back down again, feel what the helicopter wants to do, and try to minimize the number of inputs. And I'm feeling pretty good about that now. A tiny bit of drift. I just cancel that drift with a very small amount of pressure on the cyclic. Now we're going backwards, so I'll put a bit of forward stick in there and then get ready to cancel it out again so that we don't overcorrect. And that's pretty good. Like, let's just pop back down on the ground again. It's the reverse. It'll be the left skid that touches first. There it is. Then we sit in that position there again, and I'll just continue lowering the collective, and then the right skid hits. Not too bad. And with all of that done, make a note of those settings on the input viewer again when you're doing this for yourself. And let's get into our second machine for this look at picking up into a hover. This is the Guimbal Cabri G2, an excellent two-seater training platform with a main rotor that spins clockwise, like most European helicopters, clockwise, which means that the nose is going to want to move to the left when we pick up the machine, which means we'll be applying right pedal. That's the reverse of what we would expect from an American helicopter and the Robinson R66 that we just saw. And if you're getting value from these videos on tips and tricks and reviews about helicopters, I'd love it if you could subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Alright, so what are we going to do here? We are in the same spot on the same runway, and we're all looking good to go down here. So I am going to tell you about something I've noticed about the Cabri, and which I've confirmed by reading a few online forums, and that is when it is occupied only by someone in the right seat, the machine needs forward cyclic on picking up. You wouldn't have thought that the helicopter was going to take off backwards, but it kind of will when it's only got one person in it. So I'm going to get that ready by moving forward there on the cyclic, and I'm going to introduce some right pedal, quite a lot of right pedal. It's a Fenestron rotor in the G2 that is enclosed in its housing there. They are more efficient during cruise, tail rotors of that type, but less efficient in hover. So I'm using quite a bit of right pedal there, and I think I'm ready to start introducing collective. So let's bring that up now. Here we go, gently up. I've got forward cyclic in, not a lot of right cyclic needed. The tail rotor will take care of that for us. And watching the MLI2, that's that percent readout of power on the panel, 50% now, where it will start getting light in these conditions. Yes, there we go, just adjusting the pedal slightly. And we're starting to go up on the right skid, and there we go. Tiny bit squirrely on the pedal perhaps, but we made it. And let's just cancel out that motion there. So, hey, let's talk about where we look during a pickup and hover. Now, this is one of those skills that you never thought you would need until you started trying to fly these things. You don't want to be focusing just in one place, like just at the end of the runway, or just on those numbers, or just on those piano keys that are right below me right now. You need a gaze that takes in all of the relevant information about how the helicopter is moving during its hover. So with that little left drift there, I'm going to counteract with a tiny bit of right cyclic, and this Cabri is very stable really once you learn to not over control it. So I'm looking in front, and I'm letting my peripheral vision feed information to my brain, such as it is, to feel how we're moving across this runway here. So I'm looking in the middle distance. I'm getting the sense that the piano keys are moving, or that I'm moving across the piano keys going backwards, so I just allow the cyclic to come forward slightly. And yes, so you need to learn this. I've heard it described as a soft gaze, not to be focusing only on one aspect of the visual picture here, because if you do, you'll potentially start to overcorrect or miss important visual inputs. If we were flying this machine in real life, we would feel our movement, and our stomach would get pushed around left and right and forwards and backwards and up and down. We lack that sensation, unless you've got a very fancy motion rig, in which case I'm quite jealous of you. Alright, we've got a tiny bank angle there, and so now I lower the collective, and that's a pretty nice soft touch. There was a tiny yaw action to the right, I noticed, when the skid made contact. I'd love real pilots of the G2 to comment on that. I wonder if there's a bit of a ground interface issue with the Cabri flight model in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 as it currently stands, or I could be wrong. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that little yaw, inducing of a bit of yaw when one skid contacts the ground. So that's the G2. Helicopter number 3, the H125, the Squirrel, the Écureuil, the A-Star, no matter what you call it, it's an excellent machine to fly. So let's try this one out. As usual, default loadout. This one has people in it, but that's okay. We still see a well-noted H125 behaviour with this Asobo rendition of the machine. So let's just get right into it. It is going to need, being a European helicopter again, right pedal and some right cyclic and some rear cyclic. I'll come into that in a second. You won't be needing a lot of tail rotor here because the tail rotor on the H125 is big and powerful. So it doesn't require a whole lot of right pedal on a normal takeoff like this. But it might need a bit more right cyclic than the Cabri did. So it's kind of the reverse of the Cabri. Less tail rotor needed, but more right cyclic. Now, the anticipated behaviour in a normal takeoff for the H125 is that the left skid lifts first, and then the front of the right skid lifts, which means that the last part of the helicopter to leave the ground is the rear right skid. So that's the normal procedure, and that's how we do it on here. Right cyclic with a little bit reverse, and our pedal ready to go. So let's start lifting this collective. Up you come. And we will start to get light soon. You hear the sound change. There we go. It comes up onto the right skid. I can just hold it there for a second. Holding it there. You don't need to hold it there, but I'm just doing it to show you where it's sitting. Take a note of that position on the indicator. And then we bring the last part up. Not too bad. I'm going to edge backwards and I'm going to repeat it. I want to edge backwards so that I can see those piano keys. Okay, so we reverse it. It's the rear right skid that makes contact first, and then the left skid settles down. Alright, so I've still got that collective in. One more time. Here we go. Not quite as nice as the first one, but we have largely held our position. I'll just nudge it over here to the right slightly. That's better. Good. We receive the inputs, and then we analyze them, and we act upon our analysis. The wonders of the human brain when it's functioning correctly. Alright, so something else to talk about. Your death grip. We all do it. It's a good habit to try and get yourself away from. Instead of holding onto that stick like your life depends on it, try to relax. Fewer inputs, remember? I say as I'm just overdoing it a bit here right now, as I relax my hand. There we go, that's better. Receive the information and act upon it. I'm letting the helicopter do most of the work here. I'm hardly doing anything. That's better. The less I do, the more stable it is. Yeah, so your hand, don't let all of your arm's weight go down into your hand and onto the stick. It'll make it harder to have a relaxed, safe control upon that stick. If you can rest your hand on the joystick itself, on the joystick base, and then just use your fingers on the stick, that can be good. I'm using a non-centering stick. If yours is centering and you're able to change the springs, then for helicopters, the lightest spring that you've got would probably be the best choice. If you can't rest your hand on the base of the joystick, then maybe you could rest your arm on a leg or perhaps an armrest on a chair, just to stop all that weight from going down onto your hand and making your control of the machine that much more difficult. So, soft gaze, soft hands, have an idea of what your helicopter is going to do before you start doing it, and give yourself plenty of time to practice. Be patient with yourself. Let me know how you go, and I'll look forward to seeing you in another video real soon. See ya!